an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Deadwood, Season 2, Episode 5, Complications. In this episode, this was a rough one. This was a rough enough episode for me that I did not watch it a second time. And this is the only time so far covering this show that has ever happened. But I simply could not do it again. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Patrick for commissioning these episodes. I hope y'all will forgive me. But, I have always been really sensitive, like, I think maybe abnormally so, to depictions of racism and oppression like the ones in this episode. And there have been a couple movies that had surprise ties to the Holocaust, for example, and there was a lot of really vivid either depiction or description of pogroms, and I have broken down sobbing, the kind of sob where you think you might vomit, kind of like panic reaction that feels like it's coming from somewhere else. It feels like what I would imagine like a PTSD reaction is like, and I don't understand where that comes from because I don't have experience with anything like this. It's simply far beyond the rational reaction of understandable grief and upset and sympathy and disgust. It's more than that. And this episode, having these two black men who are targeted, one of them is targeted because he is friends with the other, and the other who is called N-word general, and I will just say right now, I am not going to be saying that N-word word. So I don't care how much they say it on the show, I am not going to do it. I can't get past that word. It was so hard just watching this for everybody to be throwing that word all over the place. I understand its realism, and that is totally valid and fine. I'm not faulting the show for it. I'm simply saying that every time I hear it, it's like somebody pinching and twisting my skin. But the scene, just talking about it, guys, just talking about it is getting me fucked up. God, I don't know why I'm like this. It's like, it keeps me from being able to watch and read pieces of art that I know are really important, but it's like, I can't handle it. But the scene where they come up to his friend and demand to know where he is, and he's hidden him under the hay. But the instant this guy gets in his face, the instant, he immediately gives up the other dude, which he should do. I don't fault him an iota for that. But the shame on his face is so painful to see. He wants to be better, but he can't without getting killed, because they would absolutely kill him without a second thought, because he's not even a person. He's not even a person. He's like a pet or something that they let be out of the kindness of their hearts. You know, if he cooperates with them and they know that he's a, quote, good one, that'll turn in the bad one. And the way that they drag the general out and tar him I'm like, thank God it stops when it does, because it is quite bad enough as it is. But I thought I was going to be sick. I really did. And I'm concerned that this is going to be coming up again in the show, and I am really dreading it. I'm dreading it in this, like, visceral way that if I weren't covering this show for a commission, I don't know if I'd be able to push past this episode and continue watching the show, simply because of my fear surrounding seeing more of this kind of thing. It was bad enough with Wu, but with Wu, it's all verbal. And Swearingen is at least, like, on his side in a practical way. And I felt like that mitigated somewhat this feeling of him being completely alone. But this was different. This was different. And I'm so worried about it, guys. And it really, like, helps. I appreciate it, at least. I don't know if it really helps, but I appreciated that the general at the end, I think he tells Jane to tell Hofstetler, I would have done the same thing, because he's trying to make him feel less guilty about it. Like, he says, I would have done the same thing, only quicker. Because he understands, you know, who else is going to understand as well as him? But I don't feel like Hofstetler is going to forgive himself for that. I feel like, I don't know. And I just can't imagine being put in that position where you can either stand up for people who are being treated the same way you are and be killed. Like, there's really no question. At the very least, get the shit beat out of you, but likely killed just for fun. Or you can turn them in and live with knowing whatever they do to that person. And he has to sit there and listen to Jane peeling this tar off of his skin and yanking the skin off of him. And it's really, like, guys, this was really rough. So I want y'all to know where I stand with this and how extreme my reaction is to it for whatever reason. I'm not, again, really sure why it's so, like, I was almost shaking kind of thing. It was like I was having a small panic attack watching. So forgive me, guys, if there are some other plot points that come up with this later on, and I have a really hard time talking through it and discussing it with y'all, because subject matter like this is, like, what is there to even say? You know, like, it was just brutal. It was just brutal. And I have a hard time even focusing on what's actually happening because I don't want to watch it. I don't want to keep my eyes on the screen, you know? So I just feel like I'm in this weird place with that stuff, and I don't know exactly why it's so intense, but there it is. And I wanted to get that out of the way at the top because, like I said, this is the first Deadwood episode that I have not rewatched and been consciously like, I'm not rewatching this one. I can't do it. There has been, I think there might have been one where I rewatched it in part, but that was like, I didn't have the time to completely rewatch, I think. And this one, I finished it and knew I wasn't going back again. So yeah, guys, sorry. So this episode, really, it begins with because it's called Complications. It begins with a complication that I should have seen coming. I really should. Which is that Alma is pregnant with Seth's child. Of course, she's pregnant. I don't know why I didn't think of this. I guess I assumed that she was going to be like finding, like, you know, she knows that the doc has access to stuff and provides it to all of the brothels in the camp. And I assumed that she would be taking care of things on her end in that regard. It does not. It turns out that, like, she is hesitant to even talk to the doctor at all because she feels like he is so judgmental towards her. And this pregnancy is like, I would like to register once again my admiration for Alma, because this bitch is about to do something really fucking ballsy. And that is, she is about to carry to term a child, even though she is unwed, and everybody in town knows that she was fucking Seth. So, a couple things. One, I am dying to know what the fuck Seth is going to do. Because I imagine that she is going to tell him that he is off the hook. She understands. He has a wife. We knew something could happen. Yada, yada, yada. I want a child. This is my deal. I imagine she's going to try and be like that with him. I also imagine that Seth is absolutely not going to be able to cope with that. He has too deep a sense of responsibility. And he's not going to be able to, like, let himself off the hook. There's no way. I don't know how he compensates without his wife finding out. The only thing I can imagine is that he tells her. Because that seems like something Seth would do. But if he were to do that, he would be subjecting his wife to an even deeper humiliation by her knowing that this woman is pregnant by Seth and having to watch her. I can't help but think this might be motivation for Alma to finally leave the camp. But I don't think she'd want to do that if it meant leaving the doctor behind, because she needs him and he's really good and compassionate, and he has been a comfort to her now. Things turned a corner here. So I feel like if it weren't for the doctor telling her that she could carry this child, because the issue is that Alma has a uterus that is shaped oddly that makes it difficult to carry a child. And she has always been given to understand that she flat out can't have children, or if she does, it would kill her. And the doc is like, that's not the case. It will be difficult. There will be pain. And I can't lie to you about that. You'll be in pain. But it's not going to be the kind of difficult where you might die. It's simply, you know, it's an extreme amount of pain, and you are an addict who is not going to want to be, like, put down with an opiate. And if you don't have that as an option, you just have to bear it. And she understands what that means and is willing to do it anyway. I just can't think what she's going to have to endure as an unmarried woman, getting, like, eventually really showing. She can keep it secret for a time. What will it be like for her? Because she's in a really strange position in this camp. She is the, like, wealthiest for sure. And that's by virtue of her claim. But she may also have been the wealthiest when she arrived with her husband by virtue of his circumstances. She is I won't say highborn woman, but she's obviously, like, upper middle class, doing very well for herself, and in a unique position to do what she wants and not have to suffer the specific kinds of social ramifications that she would suffer if she were living in a city amongst others of her peers. So I just am not really sure what it will be like for her, because I imagine she's going to get looks and comments and things like that. But like, who of consequence is going to have anything to say to her? I just don't know. Could she marry someone really quickly with the understanding that they're going to be father to her child? Oh my God. I didn't even think of that until this second. But I'm thinking suddenly like Ellsworth. Ellsworth is somebody that I feel like would, I'm sorry, my allergies are acting up today, so I'm like laughing, but I'm choking. Excuse me. Ellsworth is somebody I feel like would look out for her, and he's not of her rank. So marrying him would be its own sort of like scandal, but it might save her the headache of what she's doing now, carrying this child. And he seems like the type that would be willing to protect her in that way, because he doesn't have other prospects, does he? He knows what was going on with her and Seth, so there would be no mistaking what was happening there. But I kind of love that idea, even though it isn't really fair to Ellsworth at all. And I don't think she'd go for that, because I think part of what Alma is really enjoying lately is not being beholden to anyone and being essentially now independently wealthy. Alma's scene with Trixie, because she goes to Trixie for advice, is so fucking good, man. Trixie is so good. Okay. I was saying last season, and also the first episode of this season, when Seth and Al get in their fist fight, I was saying how obviously Trixie is disgusted with Seth because of how much she likes Saul and how she feels like Seth is incredibly selfish and is ruining things for Saul, who is working really hard and not getting credit, or at least not being treated with the kind of respect that she thinks he deserves. Seth is constantly risking Saul's life by proxy. But you know what's something that I hadn't considered in terms of why she might really hate Seth the way she does, is that she gave the doctor a yes when he asked her, after her suicide attempt, if she'd be willing to leave camp with Alma. She told him yes. She squeezed his hand in response. And Alma was going to go ahead and leave until it became clear that Seth cared for her the way that she had grown to care for him. And Seth's confession made it so that Alma did not want to go. Which meant that essentially Trixie was robbed of her chance. I could totally see if Trixie kind of blames Seth for her still being stuck in this camp. I don't know if that's actually there, if that's a factor or not. But if he had just kept himself to himself, this Alma would have left. And at this point, Alma leaves. Trixie's not going with her. Like, they turned a corner on that front. I think anyway. Now she has gotten so that she's attached to Saul. It's fascinating to me that this thing with Saul is being allowed by Al without the kind of like the punishment that he was meting out earlier. He found out that Saul and Trixie had had sex and like forced Saul to pay for it. And evidently now she's over there all the time and has been. This isn't just something that's been starting up since Al got sick and couldn't keep track of her. She's been over there, and he seems okay with that. And I'm really curious exactly what happened to make it so that they have this agreement. Did they sit down and talk about it? Did he just accept the fact that she's like going to be trying out other things, that she can't keep doing what she's doing for the rest of her life. Because, I mean, you know, you can only hook for so long. And then you're going to get to a point where you're either exhausted or you're not like a prime target. And you're not a moneymaker, and your place is going to get taken by somebody younger. Excuse me, I'm so sorry, guys. But I like it, of course. Don't get me wrong. Trixie hanging out with Saul, learning how to do accounting. The number of like Jew jokes about this is simply, I can't handle it, guys. I'm so not good at coping with this kind of like period humor that I know is accurate, but is so offensive. Like, it's just so hard for me to fucking cope with it. I just can't. But, I want her to make herself, like, figure out a skill that she can carry on earning for herself without having to rely on her looks for the rest of her life, because that's simply not going to be a winning strategy forever. And I feel like she really seems to care about Saul. It doesn't feel like the, put on. And I'm wondering if anything is really going to happen there. Would Saul marry her? I don't know what sort of expectations are on him. I don't know what family he comes from. I don't know anything, And he's not leaving camp. So if he were to marry her, what change would that really... Where is Saul living? Is he still living in the? I guess he is still living above the shop. He's in that back room most of the time, but I assumed that he was back there because of his shoulder. So it was a way for him to keep an eye on the shop while still like kind of resting. But is there a spot above the shop where he sleeps? Anyway, I'm sorry guys, I'm all over the place this episode, but I really wanted to talk about Trixie because when Alma comes to her, Trixie's first irritated. Understandably. She's just like, you knew who to come to all of a sudden. And also like makes it a point to say to Alma some things about how she says something like, well, gee, Trixie, I can't help but notice that you seem to be spending much more time in this shop and learning all these other skills, to point out the fact that Alma has come to her to demand help without any sort of interest in Trixie herself or how she's doing. She didn't check up on her. The fact that Alma decided not to leave camp, it seems like it never even occurred to her the kind of ramifications that could have on Trixie's life. And Trixie resents the fact that this woman had such control over what happened to her and seems so unaware of it and so cavalier about it. And I really appreciated that, honestly, because Alma is a snob. 100%. I like her. I do. And I think she does her best. A lot of the time. But that streak in her is really ugly. And it's the kind of thing that's like, the only way to cure someone of that. And I say cure with an asterisk because I don't feel like you ever really do. You just sort of teach them to be better, but you can never really cure it, is to consistently point out when they're doing it and what behaviors they are exhibiting that point to snobbishness being at the root of it. And I feel like Trixie pointing out the way that Alma has not seemed to take an interest in anything to do with her, the way that Alma talks to her and comes and like demands her time and attention, even though Trixie's in the middle of her own thing. I respected the fact that Trixie is willing to help Alma. She is going to do what she can, but she isn't going to let this woman off the hook in terms of how she has treated Trixie and abandon her, essentially. And I think that is fair and justified. So what Trixie does, because she talks with Alma about the options that are open to her. And I appreciated that she framed it that way. These are your options. Because Alma is really afraid about her, her issues with her uterus, that she won't be able to carry a child and that it could hurt her. But she also kind of wants it. And because Trixie assumes that she wants an abortion right away and is telling her that she can get tea from the doc, and tells her that she has gotten rid of 7 pregnancies, which I don't know how many of you have taken the either the morning after pill is not an abortion pill, but it is a similar like dose. I don't want to say a similar dose of hormones because what the doc is brewing is not hormonal, but it's a dose of hormones that will fuck your system up pretty good for a couple days. And then there is the abortion pill, which is like a termination that you can do at home. That isn't like, if you get a termination in an actual office, they like, it's a kind of surgery almost where they will go in and clear your womb out using basically like a vacuum kind of thing. And a lot of people prefer the pill because you don't have to go through that, but it's much more, it has a long, what's the word I want? It takes a long time to work. You take the pill and there's basically like 24 to 48 hours of bleeding and pain. And it's pretty brutal from what I've heard. I have never used that, but it's the sort of thing that I imagine you do it once and you're just like, I just can't go through this again. Oh my God. And for Trixie to have gone through something like that 6 times is so unthinkable. Like how awful it must be to have no control over your own body because somebody else is selling you and that you don't get, she doesn't get a choice. Like I'm 1,000% certain they don't ask any of the whores if they want to keep the baby. That's not a thing. You are fed what you are fed if you are found to be pregnant. And that is the end of the story. And you know, if you are pro-choice, like I am, the choice is the key word. The fact that these women are being forced to put their bodies through this trauma, aside from the fact of being like essentially raped all the time, I just can't imagine. And I think about what women went through and still go through, and it's just disgusting. And I don't know how we like have survived as one half of the species of this world. But anyway, so Trixie is like, you know, I have a solution that I have used a bunch of times. And Alma's like, well, I'm not sure that that's what I want to do. Trixie says, why don't you go to the doc? And she's like, because I feel that he judges me. And Trixie sort of gets snide here and is like, oh, he judges you, unlike me, who pats you on the head and gives you advice and tells you that everything is going to be fine. Which feels like it really, as much as like I want to say over and over again, I want to be like, Trixie, you're being so hard on her. Nothing she says is wrong. She's 100% right about every comment. And the reason that Alma goes to Trixie is simultaneously, I know that you will have the information that I need, but also, if you judge me, I don't care because you're just a whore. Whatever. And it's just really like, it's something that I think she deserves to be called out on because it's absolutely true. And there's no way to like sidestep that, you know? So anyway, Trixie goes to the doc and basically like yells at him and is like, so this is what's going on with the widow. She is in a bad way. She is very worried and she doesn't want to come to you because you were so fucking judgmental towards her when she was trying to come off the dope that she doesn't want you to like find out about anything else that's going on with her because it's shameful. And the doc is so penitent. Like he goes and he pretends to be singing to Sophia as a, you know, an excuse to go into the widow's room. And dances around it. Like, she so obviously knows why he's here. She can tell that there's something else going on. And he keeps on being like, nope, just wanted to check on the little girl. Just wanted to make sure that she's all right. Just doing, just doing that thing. But if you did have something you wanted to talk about, and she's like, oh, fuck's sake. Because she really didn't want Trixie to tell the doc. But it's good in the end that she did. And the doc gives her a full examination and is just like, so, this will be difficult for you. It will be painful. But you will not die. And I believe that you are capable of having this child. You just have to be prepared for a very tough pregnancy. And it seems that Alma is willing to make that choice. She wants a child enough that going through something like this all alone is something that she is willing to consider. And I cannot understand that at all. Not to say that I don't think this is the right choice for her to make. I honestly, for me, the option of having the child never even entered my mind, because she is in such a position and in such an era where this would just be the fact that she is even considered it. Never mind is going to follow through and actually do that. I can't help but admire in a way because of how much she's taking on, and that willingness with the full understanding of what it's going to be like, or maybe not full understanding, but she thinks she does understand. That's a kind of bravery. And similarly, having children at all is a kind of bravery. And that is something that I have just never been able to understand ever. I do not understand anyone's desire to have a child. It's simply a completely alien concept to me. Wanting to put your body through that, wanting to raise a tiny person and instill in them all of the baggage and mistakes and fuck-ups of your life onto them for them to bear into the future and fuck other people up with, is simply not appealing to me at all. And I'm sure that there are people out there who do a good job of raising kids that are fairly well balanced and go out into the world and do better and make the world better. I have no faith whatsoever that I would be one of those people that would create that kind of person to carry on into the world. I simply don't have that faith. It's for me, I've always seen people who believe that they can raise a child well has been the height of arrogance to me. And how many people in the world are willing to do it is mind-boggling. It's such an enormous responsibility that it's terrifying. Like the implications, if you do it wrong, I just can't imagine. Like, never mind the simple expense of it. And it's expensive enough if your child is well, is healthy, and, is able to function in the world. But that's not a guarantee either. Your child could have all kinds of issues and problems. And then you're not only dealing with that extra level of responsibility, but that the money in order to provide a life for them that's, any sort of life at all. So what's going on with the widow is like, she has stepped from a place that I could understand and admire into a place that I admire and do not understand. And I simply don't think I will ever get there. I have friends around me right now who are having babies, and it's just, I just don't, I try to be happy for them for their sake, because I know that's what they want. And in that respect, cool, good. But it is the sort of thing that I just see that my life, like getting into that phase where I am at the age where people start having children. And it is like, I am uncomfortable in the world all of a sudden because I am surrounded by a thing that just makes me so deeply uncomfortable personally and is inescapable at this point. All of my friends, me and Owen, out of our crew of friends, are really the only ones who don't want children. So we're going to be the exception soon. And that is such a bummer to me. So yeah, and Alma, like, I'm also kind of worried that Alma's pregnancy is going to upset Sophia because Sophia has been adopted essentially by her. And, the idea of Alma raising her own child alongside Sophia, I feel like it would be understandable if Sophia felt as if a daughter of her own blood, or a child, we don't know if it's going to be a girl or not, a child of her own blood would mean more to Alma than Sophia does. And I find that to be an understandable question, not only because of the reality of somebody's own child meaning something different to them, especially if they didn't think they could have a child. There's a whole other additional layer of miraculousness to this child. But there's also like, I don't feel like I have seen Alma be particularly affectionate towards Sophia. So it's hard for me to really, I don't doubt that she feels a responsibility to the girl. I don't doubt that she is going to take care of her and continue to do so. She cares enough about her that she didn't leave the camp with Seth and decided to, you know, not that Seth gave her really a choice, but she wasn't going to anyway, I'm pretty sure. And there's just a sort of distance there that I don't know would be there with her own child, or if that's just the way Alma is, if that's how she is, that she is unable to express affection towards a child, if she just doesn't really know how to do that, or maybe in this era it's not considered strictly appropriate to do, because there is a real difference between the way children were raised at one time and the way we raise them now in terms of how we express love and affection and protectiveness and all of that. And maybe in this era, holding a child sort of at arm's length is how it was. And the way that she is handling Sophia is completely valid for the time. But I just worry that Sophia is going to feel some sort of way about this. And I don't know how I feel about that being a plot point because Sophia is such a little girl and hasn't really had much to do in terms of acting in this show. She's just kind of been around and looked vulnerable most of the time. And if there were to be something that they added into the script that required her to be more, to have more to do, I don't know if she would be able to handle it or not. We haven't really seen her put to the test, I don't think. And I often am not a fan of storylines that involve children simply because of child actors often not being super great about it. But anyway, so that's what's going on with Alma, and her decision to carry the child to term is both baller and a mystery. But let's go to Al. Good old Al. So Al is waking up and finally able to speak. It's pretty rough at first, but he starts to be able to pick it up a little bit better. And the whole thing initially between him and the doc and his guys, Johnny and Dan, are that there is so much shit going down in the camp. And they don't know how much they should tell him because the doc is insistent that they not disturb him. And of course, if they tell him shit, he is going to be disturbed because the shit that's happening is disturbing. So we get throughout this episode different levels of panic on his behalf, or different levels of indignation that things are happening without him, or that he wasn't told about things, or just indignation at the fact that all of this shit went down as soon as he got ill. Because, you know, that's certainly a plot device in itself, that they had Al sidelined so that all of this shit could happen in the camp without Al's interference. But also, that is the way life works, right? Like, this feels so true to me. It doesn't feel contrived at all, even though it could feel contrived. I feel like it really... It's something that I don't know how many shows could pull off, so purposefully sidelining a main player and not have it feel like you just did this to get him out of the way. It doesn't feel like that to me, though. I guess because they focus so much on the character aspect of it and how much everyone sort of depends on him, how much he is like handling his illness in the only way that he knows how, which is initially complete denial, like doesn't want even anyone to see that he's sick. So I think that the show handling it the way they did and giving it the full attention the way they did, if they had had Al get sick and then just sort of shunted him off into a corner and had the episodes take place with only what's happening in the camp and only the what do you call it? Intrigue. But then we just don't see Al almost at all, then I think it would have felt much more forced. But because the show spends just as much time with us and Al and his people, it feels like he's still a big part of the story. It's simply his story has taken him somewhere else briefly. So that's some good writing there, you know? And it's those little things that are really like key to making everything feel like it's organic. So him waking up, we have like Dan smiling at him in this way, and Al looks at him and says, "Did you fuck me while I was out?" And Dan says, "Hell no." And he says, "Well, then quit looking at me like that." And I just started cracking up, and I love that Johnny is cracking up also. Like, Johnny seems genuinely delighted, even though Dan is a little bit like put off by it. I do want to mention too that the makeup that they have done for Al is outstanding. He looks like hell. It's so like he's got blood in his eyes. He's got these huge bruises, sort of welts on his face. He's still got, you know, the broken ribs and everything as well. Like, there's so much wrong with him. And he's really good at acting what's the word I want? He's really good at acting like he wants to move so much more than he's able to. Like, he's trying and his body is failing him. And that's a pretty tough thing to get across, I feel like. But it's genuinely like reminds me of if you are around somebody who's older, who's had, oh, you know what? I just realized this. I was about to say someone who's older who's had a stroke, but it turns out the doc thinks he did have a stroke. I completely forgot about that. So yeah, he must just be sort of like imitating that, because the way that he moves feels really accurate to that. There's a stutter almost to movements he makes, and a slowness. And it's not like he's shaking or trembling as he moves. It's almost like he is having to consciously think through every motion of his hand and focus really hard to make sure that it goes where he's trying to get it to go, and that it just takes more energy and attention than it did before. So Dan says you're going to have to gather all your fucking wiles now, because there's developments that need interpreting on every front. And at this point, the doc interrupts and is just like, you are not going to fucking talk about business to him. And Dan just starts to talk about, Wu coming to talk to him about some guy from San Francisco. And Dan is like telling him this, thinking that it's just a funny, like, he starts off being like, oh, you're going to need to interpret this stuff. But I don't think Dan quite realizes how true that is. I think he's saying this to Al as a means of getting his spirits up and being like, hey, guy, we really need you back because there's stuff happening in camp that we can't handle without you. Like, he's just trying to be like, do you know what I mean? Like, just trying to uplift him a little bit. And instead, what's going on is that he's unintentionally stepped right into genuine intrigue that really does need Al's attention. And he doesn't know it. And Al, hearing it, because he's smarter than Dan and understands all of this better than Dan, immediately does understand the full impact or potential for what these like little things that he doesn't seem to assign any particular importance to, what they could actually mean for the camp or what's happening, that if Wu is upset and coming to find him. So yeah, he's just like, Dan sort of stumbled into it and hasn't really given a lot of thought to what he's saying because he just wanted to sort of bolster his spirits. And it turns out that this guy is genuinely worried about some of the stuff that he has said. So let's go over to, I'm going to briefly dip into what's going on with Merrick because this ties in with Al a little bit later. So Mr. Jerry, who is the commissioner, who is in league with Cy and what's his face, Mr. Wolcott, he is fucking with the wrong one, only he don't know it. He meets Merrick, and, you know, granted, Merrick does seem a little bit bumbly initially. He does seem like a guy that's like maybe a little bit verbose to conceal the fact that maybe he's not super intelligent. So I understand Jerry making this misjudgment, but he comes in with this piece of, what's the word? A declaration of some kind, and wants Merrick to publish this in the newspaper. And the declaration is like a sort of announcement about the future of the camp, only presented in such opaque, vague terms that it could really mean any number of things, but it definitely sounds like bad news cloaked in cover my ass sort of language. And Merrick is demanding an explanation, a real explanation of what this means, because in his opinion, there's no point in publishing something worded this way in the paper, because people are going to be coming to him all damn day asking what that actually meant. And he knows that. So Merrick is just like, I'm not putting this in my paper unless you can explain to me exactly what this all means. And Jerry is trying to be like impressive and aggressive. And it's like, I didn't realize that providing an interpretation was part of my job. I gave you something to print. Now print it. And Merrick seems pretty suspicious of the fact that Jerry does not want to give him a straight answer about anything. And Merrick does something really fucking smart, which is he refuses to print it. He decides that he's just going to post it as it was sent to him, as it was handed to him, on the door of the office for everyone else to read, but that he isn't going to actually put it in the paper with that, because one, it's going to seem as if, I don't know if an endorsement is the right word, but it's going to seem as if, I guess endorsement is the right word, as if he is behind whomever gave this to him to print, if he doesn't also include an explanation with it. And if he does include, like, he can't include an explanation because he hasn't gotten a straight answer from the guy. And it's just something that will wind up coming back to bite him in the ass. So he has both called Jerry's bluff and protected himself by putting it on the front door instead, which Merrick, bless you, because that was such good thinking. I had no idea that you had it in you, and I should have, because he has stood up to people that are pretty scary a couple times in ways that I didn't expect. But it is genuinely a beautiful moment when Jerry's strutting around talking to Cy and Francis, thinking that he's really got one over on this dumb schlub who works at the newspaper office, and then finds out that this guy sort of like sidestepped his entire plan. And this leads to Jerry getting mobbed because everybody in town, the Hoopleheads as they are called, the Hoopleheads are very upset at the implication that somebody's going to come and take their claims, because that's what they feel like this is saying. Because why wouldn't they? It's worded so as to not really be saying anything. And they come after Jerry, who is hiding at first behind like the grill in the in Cy's casino. And these guys all come in and yank it down. Cy doesn't step in. And Francis mentions a little bit later that Cy doesn't step in. And I can't help but think Cy was hoping something was going to happen to Jerry, because I think he doesn't like the guy. I don't think Cy expects Jerry to be a good business partner in this sense, and would be very open to Jerry being replaced with somebody else. But it's pretty clear from Francis's reaction to seeing this that he has not quite appreciated the risk that he has undertaken with this camp, which is really interesting because we know that Francis is a violent man himself. He goes after women, but I assumed that he went after women as well as went after men. And with women, there was just the sexual bent to it. But that he was also like that kind of violent where he would be totally fine with brawling with somebody if it came down to it. Now I am reassessing that whole thought process that I had, because he doesn't seem to be prepared after all. He backs down on, like, when he has that confrontation last episode with Ellsworth. But I assumed that was because he was going to come at him in another way, which may still be true. But he seems really shook by what happened with Jerry. And like later on when he is meeting with that girl again, I can't remember the hooker's name. Allison? Is that it? Abigail? It starts with an A, I thought. But he like wants her to take his pants off the first time that they have been together. So last episode, when she is on top of him, I thought that she was fucking him and it was just a really quick fuck. But it turns out that she's just basically like dry humping him through his pants. And she explains this all because she's talking to Joni, who really wants to know, like, exactly what do you do? Because I think Joni is hoping that she can step in and keep this poor girl from getting killed if necessary. But she needs to know exactly what he likes and how he likes it. So we find all this out from this girl. And then the very next scene with the two of them together, he's asking her to do something new. And I think that's a reaction to him being, like, concerned about the position that he is now in, because Jerry winds up having to be taken into protective custody by Seth in order to keep him safe, even though he's a piece of shit. Seth could tell he's a piece of shit, and Seth obviously kind of doesn't want to protect him, but they're on the same side technically of the law, so he has to. And that's what leads to the Hoopleheads grabbing the general and trying to tar him in the street. There's a weird thing where one of the Hoopleheads is this dude who's like obviously got kind of a history here that has been, we're given to think that people know who he is, recognize him, that he's been in camp for a while, but he's not somebody that I remember having seen before. And he has some sort of prior conflict with the general, because when the general sees him, he immediately is about to like duck and hide. Like he knows that this guy in particular is going to be after him. And when this guy catches up with him, the whole thing is that we're going to fuck this guy up in the street to distract Seth so that we can get the commissioner out of jail and like question him and beat him up. And he doesn't expect for Seth to come out with a gun, which I don't know why you wouldn't expect that. Of course he is. I think maybe this guy is such a racist that he thought Seth wouldn't come out with a gun because this is only a black dude that we're fucking up, so who cares? And he badly misjudged, because I think you could be fucking up like, you know, a grasshopper and Seth would have a gun on you. Like, he does not play, and he knows that y'all are dangerous and jumpy, and that he can't like be cautious with you guys. He has to be more forceful than with the average person, or else y'all are not going to listen to him. So this whole deal is just so ugly, and I talked about that to begin with, and I'm just done with talking about it, frankly. The general has a wonderful scene with Jane, which I don't want to like talk about too much, because I only have like 5 minutes left this episode, and I still need to talk about the rest of what's going on with Al. But I adored their interaction. I love the fact that, like, you know, don't get me wrong, she still calls him the N-word and everything, but apparently that's just the word that was used all the time. But she is a lot less like worried about being seen sharing a drink with a black man than he ever expected, because he didn't think she was going to want to share her bottle. He didn't think that she was going to want anyone to know that they were drinking together. And she keeps on just being like, it's fine. Just take a drink. Sit here next to me and let's just chat. And is later the one who, you know, helps him with his fucking horrifying injury. So I'm hoping that the two of them are going to be buds. I would really like that. I don't know if he's going to hang around camp anymore. There's also that, though. I'm like, I kind of want him to just bail and leave camp, because I don't want to see what happens to him, because I feel like it's not good. Like, you know, honestly, if you're living in this era, if you are a black man, if you are a black person, probably your life doesn't end awesome. That just seems like kind of how it would go. And I'm not excited about having to watch that. But anyway, so the whole thing with Jerry getting like put into protective custody, it's brought to, because somehow Al has figured out, I think it's because he got it out of Dan that he saw Jerry going into the Belly Union. So Al has already figured out that Cy and Jerry are allies with each other. So he tells Seth and is like, you don't even know. I've been in bed unconscious and unable to talk for like 2 days, and you don't even know what's going on in this camp better than me. This is a problem. You need to go and help your man out, because he is about to be in trouble. And turns out that he is like more right than I think even he knew. And when he does go and stand up for this dude, it's just so like, what's the word I want? It's just so laced with like obligation, because he does not like this dude. Clearly. Why would you? He's a piece of shit, you know? So, and they're reporting to Al about what's going on outside, and they talk about the Hoople heads grabbing some black guy. And he's like, well, what does he have to do with this? And they don't even know. Like, they can't really tell him what's going on. He thinks it's Hostetler, because as far as they know, he's the only black guy in camp, but it's some other dude because he just showed up and they didn't even know who he was. So I'm trying to see what happens with Al at the very end here. Yeah, here we go. So Al's talking to the doc at the very end. And he is actually like starting to reabsorb the hemorrhage that happened. Cause the doc is telling him about the fact that he thinks that he has had a stroke. Hearing secondhand news from imbeciles. It strikes you as overwhelming, Al, and he demands to know when he's going to be able to get up and take care of shit himself. To which the doc is just like, man, this is your body. You don't get to set timetables for it. And Al is still just like, I am setting timetables for myself, which I can do. And Doc is like, you really can't, though. I know that you think that, but bless your heart, that's not how this works. Johnny comes in and does his like miming thing, because apparently he's lost his voice again for some reason. I don't know why he keeps losing his voice, or if he, That's right. For some reason, he thought Al was asleep. I don't know what it was right there, but I forgot that moment because he's like whispering the way that he did when he lost his voice, but apparently he hasn't because then he just says something out loud anyway. Pithy and civil, the doc directs to both of them because he doesn't want Al getting overexerted here. I love Seth staring at the doc as he leaves. The look that he gives him, it's so funny to me. He comes in and tells Al that the commissioner is all right. And offers him a drink. Al offers him a drink. And Seth sits on the side of the bed, sort of grinning at Al again, as he does not wipe the bottle off, even though Al said, if you don't wipe the bottle off, I'll slap you upside the head. And it ends with him saying, what is it? They're coming against us. And Seth nods and says, posting notice like that, not award even one commissioner of the 3 local citizenry. It really does seem that way. And Al says politicians ain't got balls for this type of unsupported move. Someone's backing their play or they would be here bending over for us. And he's just trying to figure it out. Seth says, is it Tolliver? And he says, Tolliver is us. They're not going to pick Tolliver over me this early in the game. And then says that somebody outside the camp is fucking around with things and that whoever they are, they do not understand the psychology of the people in this camp and the way that they work. And that they are going to misjudge the situation and handle it wrongly. And I think that he's probably right. There is a kind of psychology to something like this. Nowadays, it's very different. But when our country was newer and there were still these tiny little self-governed outcroppings like this, I could see how somebody like Al would handle it way differently and much better because of their closeness with the community and understanding of what people want and are afraid of. And I could see him getting back on his side if he manages to make it he just has to figure out a way to outbid, I guess, whatever it is that Wolcott's boss is promising Cy. And he hasn't really made an explicit promise of any kind yet that I remember. So anyway, yeah, this was a really busy, there was a lot going on this episode in terms of that. I'm worried about watching the next one. I'm already nervous about it, guys, but wish me luck. And thank you very much to Patrick for commissioning this show. I'm sorry that I am such a wuss. Hopefully you can forgive me. And I will be seeing you all again very soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.